To the big screen. Okay. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with Conversations with Rob. This is our about 42nd interview right now, and we try to bring good interviews with politicians, lifestyle, fitness, etc. And I'm proud to have somebody that I really admired, and I found about him in 2016 by TYT and Jimmy Dore. Interviewing him, Tim Canova, who's a law professor at Nova Southeastern University, and he specialized in banking and finance there. And he ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2016 and 2018. So, Tim, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to interview with me.
Sure. Glad to be with you, Rob. Thank you.
So, Tim, first of all, before we even get into the interview, I really watched your race against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 16. You got 43%, and we'll get into the shenanigans that happened in that race later on. But how do you go from 43% to 5.9 in 2018? I mean, what do they think? The people of South Florida are stupid?
Well, perhaps that's what they think. My feeling is they don't even care what people think anymore. They're willing to rig elections very openly, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The 43% we got in 2016 struck us as illegitimate and wrong. Our internal numbers showed us winning that race, running away with it at the end. Our internal field numbers were based on a very large field operation. We were knocking on 10 to 12,000 doors a week. Much bigger than any polling sample size, and it showed us crushing Wasserman Schultz. And then I started to hear from election experts who actually crunched the data, studied it very closely. They were convinced that the vote had been flipped on me in some way. I'm not a computer expert. I'm not an election expert. So I decided what I would do was just simply to request to see the ballots. We all in Florida have the right to inspect ballots under the public records law, a statute, and also under the state constitution. And I figured we'd count up the ballots in several precincts, and if they matched up, there'd be no problem.
Right.
But if they didn't, obviously it would suggest they were rigging the electronic voting machines. And I think the supervisor of elections stonewalled us for more than half a year. I finally filed the lawsuit. And while the lawsuit was pending, they simply destroyed all the paper ballots. And, that was 2016. No criminal investigation, no prosecution, even though we had ironclad evidence in the form of the supervisor of elections, Brenda Snipes, admitting in sworn videotape depositions that she had destroyed the ballots. And in our public records lawsuit in this civil court, the Florida Circuit Court granted a summary judgment, ruled for us, and in a 10-page order outlined all of these federal and state statutes that the supervisor had violated, and these were criminal statutes. Still, no investigation. So that's the kind of election system we have, where the rigging is done with impunity. It's done out in the open, and if you complain about it, they then try to punish you, which obviously they did to me in the last election. The 5% of the vote I got or something like that was way below what a Republican poll was showing, which was 2 weeks before the election. Wasserman Schultz and I were neck and neck at 34% each. It also was the same exact low percent for every demographic group among blacks, whites, Hispanics, Democrats, Republicans, independents, men, women. And statistically, that's impossible. The experts, highly credentialed experts, said that would be like as unlikely as winning the lottery every day for a year. So
Right.
That's the election system we have.
Well, that's the thing that gets me. And like I said, I went to Lynn University. I was in South Florida for 6 years, did my undergrad and my master's there. I know Democratic circles down there and the Democratic clubs. When you were running in 16 and 18, did they allow you? I know in 16 she did that one debate, and you kind of caught her pretty good on a couple of points when you were on, what was it, on WT, the Miami station. I know you debated her on that station.
I think it was the NBC 6.
Right.
Jim DeFeeti was the so-called narrator. the same NBC6 that the day before our primary election, up on its website, it put results up. And we asked for an explanation how you could have results. They said 69% of the precincts had reported. How you could have results the day before. And they took the results and they never gave us an explanation. No other race in the county did NBC6 publish results the day before, but that one they did.
Yeah, well, it was in the bag, and she just like what she did to you and Bernie in 16, same sort of thing. But I want to get into the her aide, and I watched an interview with this a little while back with you on Jimmy Dore talking about her aide, Erwin Awan, who he was charged with bank fraud, cyber crimes. He tried to leave the country. He was at one of the New York airports, and they got him before he left. But then Debbie Wasserman Schultz is over there in Congress fighting with the Capitol Police, saying, to get her back, she's yelling at a Capitol policeman about her computer that they had. Now, my thing is, what is in that computer that she's so scared to find it? Is it something about your race, about the 2016, the DNC WikiLeaks? She kept paying him. All these Democratic congressmen fired Erwin Awan, but she was still paying him. He was on the payroll. She was giving him $5,000 and stuff. So what did you know? Why wasn't she kicked out of office? Why wasn't she really investigated when all this stuff was going on?
There's a great book that's been written about the Imran Awan scandal by a journalist named Luke Rosiak. It's entitled Obstruction of Justice. And it goes into great detail about all the cyber crimes that Imran Awan was up to. He was basically part of a Pakistani crime family. For something like 6 months, he was actually living in Pakistan, accessing the House email server, and with access to all the personal confidential emails of the members of the House Intelligence Committee. So, there's speculation that this was a blackmail operation. There's speculation that Jeffrey Epstein was the focal point of a blackmail operation. And you saw what just happened with Epstein. Right. It was reported just over the weekend that he allegedly took his own life while while in prison. The most notorious person sitting in a cell who had been on a suicide watch. The criminal justice system has become so corrupted. You got to wonder what's not for sale in the criminal justice system. Whether the currency is in paying bribery or if it's blackmail and extortion, what's not for sale in our criminal justice system? It's really pathetic because you count on law enforcement to make sure we have the rule of law, including in our elections. And when we determined that the Broward Supervisor of Elections destroyed all the paper ballots in violation of federal and state law, this was a case that we handed to prosecutors on a silver platter with a bow tied around it. Nothing done. There's systems of justice, one for ordinary folks, and then a whole other system for the rich and powerful and politically connected.
Agree 100%. And even to go back to, I watched you multiple times on multiple TV stations in 2018 when they had the recount. Rick Scott was running around either in Florida or he's running around before he even won in Washington, D.C., before he was even elected. And he's complaining about Brenda Snipes when this happened to you in 2016 and he didn't do a damn thing. And then 2018, he's on the news saying all this stuff and he didn't do anything. So, my thing is Rick Scott, all right, it affects him in 2018, so he wants to do something. He suspends her and is complaining about her. But like you said, in 2016, and even with your race, he didn't really do anything in your race. So it's just the same old story in the state of Florida, I believe.
Well, it is. And in fact, I had an election lawyer who represented me in suing Brenda Snipes. Right. A very well-connected Republican election lawyer. And when Governor Scott was doing nothing, the Justice Department nothing, even Republicans in Broward County fell silent. After years of going after Brenda Snipes, they finally have her in the corner and they go silent. And my lawyer got back to me and said, really, it comes out to that they've got the same friends as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the same corporate financial backers. And it's not really about Democrats versus Republicans sometimes. You know, it's insiders versus outsiders.
So how do we fix the election system? We've seen in 2000 the hanging chads in Palm Beach County and all the other shenanigans in Miami-Dade and Broward. 2004 with John Kerry, the electronic voting machines, where they said we're switching votes from Kerry to Bush. And then 2018 and 16, which we saw with your two races, the shenanigans that happened with that. So how do we fix this? Should be a paper ballot, but even with a paper ballot, we saw the problems that they had in Broward in 18. So how do we fix this?
Well, we do need a system of 100% hand-marked paper ballots,
right,
counted by hand in public at the local precinct level and reported at the local precinct level. This is the kind of system they have all over Europe. They banned the electronic voting machines because they know how insecure they are. It's the kind of system we essentially had for 200 years before the electronic voting machines.
Yeah.
You know, if we were to still have those paper ballots scanned through the system and had digital scanned images made, you could still somebody could technically manipulate the scanned images, could manipulate the software. That should be the backup. But the primary counting of ballots should be by hand, and they should be paper ballots. So this isn't rocket science. If you want a transparent, verifiable system, that's the way to do it. But the problem is, to implement it, to have that adopted, you've got to have the state legislatures and the Congress to act.
Yeah.
And these are elected officials who don't seem to want to go against the interests of basically 4 very large electronic voting machine companies.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what to do at this point. 107 million people did not vote in the 2016 presidential election. Far more than voted for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. People are already opting out of the system because they think their vote doesn't matter. And I'm sorry to say that here in Florida, when you hand your paper ballot that you filled out to an election official or you mail it in, when they put it through that scanning machine, you know, you might as well just be praying for Santa Claus. There's no way to verify that the software has not been manipulated. You're not even allowed to inspect the software. And then, you know, if you want to inspect the paper ballots as a check afterwards at considerable expense, good luck. They can apparently destroy the paper ballots with impunity. So I don't know. Perhaps the way to go in the future is going to eventually be some kind of a boycott of elections. I really don't know.
So let me ask you 2 more questions about 16 and 18. Like you said, the polls had you ahead of Wasserman Schultz or in the middle. Wasserman Schultz screwed Bernie to beat the band in 2016. I still, and you know I'm a Bernie supporter, but I support you also. I don't know why he didn't come down there and try to campaign for you after Debbie screwed him so much. And I know he was in all that unity and all that, but it just was a lot of silliness. They didn't do anything in the Unity Commission really to help him out. They're going to try to screw him again. So did you ever hear back from the Sanders campaign why they didn't come back and campaign for you?
Well, yeah, in the summer of 2016, in August, when he first announced that he was coming here, I guess he announced that in June, that he'd be coming to Florida to campaign with me. That was reported, I think, in the New York Times and the New Republic. And then by August, it was clear he wasn't coming. He and I spoke a couple of times, and I spoke to other people close to him. And did I get an adequate explanation? No, I did not. But putting the pieces together, it's clear that the establishment, they had their carrots and sticks. And I'm sure that Bernie Sanders came under a lot of pressure and a lot of threats if he were to come into the belly of the beast and campaign against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now, that said, I don't even hold it against him. I truly believe, looking at our internal numbers, that we beat her without Bernie Sanders coming here.
Right.
In my district, in Florida's 23rd congressional district, in the 2016 presidential primary that was held in March of 2016, Bernie Sanders got 37% of the vote. That was it. He was not lifting me up in my own district. He was, if anything, perhaps a drag on the campaign within the district. So had he come to campaign here, who knows how it would have cut. Certainly his endorsement, even before his endorsement, I raised $1 million online in small donations. His endorsement then helped us raise another $1 million pretty quickly. So I'm not discounting the help that he did bring to our campaign, but I don't blame him for the loss. I don't really look at it as a loss. I never conceded defeat. And I don't blame him for the stolen election. He had nothing to do with that. And to some degree, I even wonder, to some extent, Bernie Sanders and those around him were well aware of the stealing that was going on against him in the spring and summer of 2016. Right. They must have known that what I was up against was not just an incumbent who was well funded, but were voting machines that could be rigged.
Right. So my next question is, and that's the last question of 2018, then I want to talk about Tulsi. We saw a big Democratic wave in 2018 where Bill Nelson lost, and we could talk about what happened in Miami at the elections. I mean, at the post office, where that crazy whack job was sending the bombs through there, and that stopped a lot of votes from being counted. Andrew Gillum was up by tons of points, and he ended up losing that race by 30,000 some odd votes. What do you believe that what happened in those two races? You know, you got Andrew Gillum, who's running against Ron DeSantis, who's saying monkey it up. He's using racial undertones and monkey music, jungle music in his phone calls. Rick Scott brought a lot of jobs to Florida, but they were low-paying jobs. He didn't help the economy in the state, and then all the algae bloom problems that we've had in the state. So what do you credit out of a Democratic wave why these guys both lost?
Well, they both campaigned with Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
True. Good point.
Okay, and I said this in 2016, that she would be an albatross around Hillary Clinton's neck. And she was. Hillary Clinton lost the state of Florida. She campaigned quite a bit with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie Wasserman Schultz could not even deliver her own state to Hillary Clinton against a candidate who had as much negative ratings as Donald Trump.
True.
And so 2 years later, the Democratic establishment repeated the mistake. Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson campaigned with Debbie Wasserman Schultz quite a bit, and it didn't help them statewide at all.
Well, Andrew Gillum moonwalked away from Medicare for All. Primary, he was all Medicare for all, Medicare for all. And then after the primary, he said, he was against it. So I think a lot of progressives seen that stuff on the debate stage when he went against DeSantis in the CNN debate. And they said, hey, you know, this guy really is not the real deal. He's a fake progressive.
Yeah, I met him on the campaign trail about a year earlier and was very impressed with him when I met him. But then when push came to shove, first he did nothing and said nothing about the destruction of the ballots in our campaign, in our 2016 race. He's running for statewide office. He wants Broward County's vote, but he stays very quiet on that. And next he starts appearing with Wasserman Schultz, campaigning with her. So, you know, again, I think she's a poison to the party and to the nation. I've said that many times. I firmly believe it. I'm hopeful that the Justice Department will start really doing its job in investigating. We've called on Governor Ron DeSantis to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the Broward County Supervisor of Elections for the destruction of the ballots, the former supervisor, and whatever staff are still there that were involved. We also believe that a special prosecutor should investigate Michael Satz is the state attorney for Broward, who has done nothing about this case. And time will tell whether law enforcement agencies finally come around to doing their jobs or not.
Right. So as a person that's a supporter of Tulsi, why don't we get all the progressives and bring them into and have them make their own party with I know you talked to the guy that runs the People's Party. I watched that interview with him and you. Why don't we make a new party? I mean, the DNC isn't doing anything to help progressive. They screwed Bernie. They don't give Tulsi any time on the debate stage. Yep. She makes great points. She stuck it to Kamala Harris, and she didn't. They go against her, call her a Putin puppet. So why don't people like Bernie, Tulsi, Nina Turner, you, Ro Khanna make a new party and just get away from the Democrats? I mean, there's so much money that Bernie and Tulsi and these people can raise. They have the money and the people behind them. Why doesn't this happen?
Well, when I ran in 2018, I ran as an independent.
Right.
And had I won, there would have been a lot of energy and enthusiasm for that kind of a third party movement, which I believe is exactly why they tried to punish me with this fraudulent, ridiculously low number. I think they did the same thing to Jill Stein in 2016. I think third party candidates have it very tough because you're running against not one party, but a duopoly that covers for each other, that wants a rigged, fraudulent election system. And maybe that would dissuade somebody like Bernie Sanders from going off on his own as well outside the Democratic Party.
Right. And more to go on Tulsi. You're a supporter of Tulsi, as am I. Why do you think that she's the best candidate to beat Trump and win the presidency, Tim?
Tulsi Gabbard has impressed me so much from the time she resigned as the vice chair of the DNC in early 2016. She was, at the time, a young, up-and-coming congresswoman in, I believe, at that point, in her early to mid-30s. Somebody who had already done 2 tours of duty in combat zones. And she was the vice chair of the party. And she saw the way Wasserman Schultz was running it and rigging the entire process, an unfair, closed process. And she spoke out about it. She resigned as vice chair with a smile on her face, and she promptly endorsed Bernie Sanders. So right from the beginning, that's a heroic, courageous, fearless thing to do, and one that shows so much integrity. And I've seen that in her politics the whole time. On issue after issue, she's somebody who has integrity, is willing to speak the truth. I think she's the only candidate in the entire field who has spoken up for Julian Assange very expressly, actually saying his name, not just platitudes about the need to protect the First Amendment, but to actually talk about Julian Assange by name and the injustice that's befallen him. So, I think the world of her. She never bought into really the Russia hysteria, this ridiculous conspiracy theory that the establishment of the Democratic Party pushed for 3 years now, and to the detriment of a lot of other issues. She's willing to think anew on many of the foreign policy issues and to stand for peace instead of this war machine.
Well, I do think if she doesn't win the presidency, I hope that we have a Democratic nominee that would pick her, if it's not vice president, put her as a defense secretary, where she would, I think, be a dynamo as far as, getting the Defense Department back in shape and getting rid of that, cutting that defense budget and really whipping that into shape.
Well, that's true. Right. I really think she might be the only candidate who could beat Donald Trump. I know people will point to the polls, and the polls even show Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump, but the polls Hillary Clinton winning him. 85% of the polls showed her winning. I think that there's a big silent vote for Donald Trump. The vote shaming strategy of the Democrats that started in 2016 with Hillary Clinton referring to Trump voters as deplorables continues. And anyone who's even thinking of voting for Donald Trump must be a racist. That's the kind of divisive rhetoric. And I've come from a family, and I've got plenty of college friends and other friends who have voted for Donald Trump, and they're planning on voting for him again. But when you shame voters this way, it doesn't change their vote. It just makes it silent. They get their revenge on Election Day.
No, I totally agree with you. I do believe that Tulsi can beat Trump because she can get some of those voters as far as the No More Wars crowd, which Trump ran on, but he lied about. And I do think, though, Bernie can get some of those Trump voters, too. But I want to ask you 3 more questions. First of all, it's the state of Florida. If Tulsi is the nominee, Bernie is the nominee, whoever it may be, how do we win the state of Florida back? I mean, I'm in Orange County right now is where I'm living, but like I said, I lived in South Florida for quite a while. And we know that's a Democratic area, so we're going to get that. But to win the I-4 corridor, and that was the thing I saw in 16, was you drive up and down from Orlando, Daytona Beach up to Jacksonville. I never seen so many Trump signs in my life. Even when Obama was running, I didn't see that many Obama signs. But it seems like Trump really has Florida pretty locked up. Do you think that even a Sanders or a Gabbard could win Florida with so much support for Trump down here?
Well, I think it'll be tough. I don't think a Democrat can win Florida by talking about Russia and
Agreed.
trying to smear Donald Trump and calling him a racist. And really, Bernie Sanders is constantly calling him a racist. I'm very disappointed in this. Talk about the issues. What's racially problematic about Trump's immigration policies? How is it different from Obama's, which, believe me, Obama's immigration policies were very draconian as well. Mm-hmm. The Democrats should get down to business in actually passing legislation in the House and putting forward an alternative agenda. That I-4 corridor you spoke about, these are not boom times. I know the unemployment rate is low, but lots of folks have very precarious job situations, quite often part-time, without benefits. Donald Trump speaks to those anxieties when he says, make America great again and put America first. The Democrats, were defending an Obama record, which might have looked decent on the surface, but so many people, again, have taken it on the chin since the 2008 financial crisis. It was a bailout that was a trickle-down bailout for Wall Street. It left a lot of people behind. The Democrats have to be able to explain how they're going to make life better for so many people who have been suffering.
Well, you wouldn't. They're not listening to you, Tim. You will put on MSNBC and CBS, all these other news stations. It's like you said, they just keep chanting Russia, Russia, Russia. Rachel Maddow is Russia all day, all night. But I do agree with you.
When Russia starts failing, it's the other R word: racism, racism, racism.
I do agree with you, though, as far as the part-time jobs. I'm right, hop, skip, and a jump away from Disney, and you see a lot of people that work at Disney, which Bernie did fight for to get that $15 job, $15 an hour to get kicked in. But even those people, I see so many homeless people all over this area, and people that are working 2-3 jobs, and they're still on the streets. So this whole thing, like you said, this whole great economy is total BS. I mean, it's not true.
And Trump called it out in 2016 because Hillary Clinton was trying to talk about how the unemployment rate was relatively low and the unemployment rate was falling. And Trump, just like Bernie Sanders, at that time said this unemployment rate is a fiction. It's missing millions of Americans who have dropped out of the labor market, or they're working part-time and they want full-time work and they can't find it. Now, of course, now that Trump's in the White House, he's singing a different song, right? He's saying what a low unemployment rate it is without talking about how much suffering is going on. But you mentioned the homeless situation. It's all over the country. It's in lots of parts of Florida. You see a suicide rate that's just disturbing and shameful, and an opioid overdose rate as well. This is a depressed population overall. I think this country is suffering from a mass depression, economically and psychologically. And it needs candidates who are going to speak to those issues and try to explain how they're going to make life better and start solving those issues. It has to be a campaign that takes Donald Trump on the issues and not just on slogans and smears.
No, I totally agree with you. And the last two questions are environmental questions. I know that you stood up against the Sable Trail pipeline, which is passed through Florida. It's, what is it, about 500 miles long, that pipeline? Can you tell the viewers more about that pipeline, and has it been installed and where it is going in the 500 miles, please?
Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy and a few other big energy interests are the ones behind the pipeline. Right. And the whole point of the pipeline is to transport fracked gas from northern parts of this country, Pennsylvania and other states, down into Florida for export, I believe, as liquefied natural gas. Well, the Sable Trail pipeline is a big key part of the transporting of that natural gas, that fracked gas. And of course, I've been very much against fracking in Florida. That was a big campaign issue against Wasserman Schultz, where she flip-flopped on it. Fracking in Florida makes no sense because the water table is so shallow, and you're really playing roulette with the water supply here. That pipeline is a 515-mile pipeline that goes from southern part of Alabama through Georgia into Florida. And at its peak, it will be pumping 1 billion cubic feet of frack gas each and every day. It's tremendous. And if there's a break in the pipeline, if there's, for whatever reasons, it could be a natural disaster that breaks the pipeline open, you really don't want that polluting the aquifer.
Well, Tim, haven't they already had issues with it already?
Yeah, there have been a lot of leaks already. And, another environmental issue, of course, is the blue-green algae. And you've seen the blue-green algae has migrated from Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the canals of Fort Lauderdale. So it could be getting into our aquifer and our drinking water. And they're afraid that might actually migrate by air and not just by water. But back to the pipeline, what impressed me are the studies that show that if you put solar panels on half the acreage of that 515-mile pipeline, you'd produce as much energy each day.
Wow.
Half the acreage. You could have a 515-mile nature walk that has solar panels and wind vanes, and it would be environmentally sustainable.
Right, but I thought, Tim, and I know Ron DeSantis was talking about some $625 million about putting that money into the environment. Now, I'm not sure if that really went anywhere. I know that was one of his campaign promises. But what do you think about his job performance on the environment? Now, when he was running, a lot of these the energy companies would donate to him, and a lot of the environmental groups gave him poor ratings compared to Gillum. So what do you think about DeSantis's job performance?
Well, when he was running in the primaries against Adam Putnam, he called out Big Sugar, which was really quite incredible. I had not seen a politician running for statewide office in Florida, Republican or Democrat, call out Big Sugar the way he did. And I think it really helped him in that primary and even in the general election. Since then, he has been somewhat aggressive in trying to take on the blue-green algae problem with task force, with actually state expenditures. We have still had some outbreaks coming out of Okeechobee. Not as bad, but that could change as the rainy season peaks. I haven't seen him do anything that would counter the interests of Florida Power and Light and the fossil fuel industry. So, the trajectory might be much the same as it was before Governor DeSantis.
So my last question is, Tim, will you ever run for office again, or what is your status? Are you going to stay with the Tulsi campaign and try to help her win the state of Florida, or what is your next endeavor?
I've been speaking out for Tulsi Gabbard, and I'll continue to. As far as me personally running for office again, hardly a week goes by without somebody contacting me and trying to convince me to run again against Wasserman Schultz or to run for Broward Supervisor of Elections. And I haven't made any decisions. I figure I'll wait till the filing deadlines in, later in 2020.
But my worry is, Tim.
Let me just say, I'm hoping in 2018 there'd be enough attention on Broward and on Wasserman Schultz and the corrupt election system that it would be our protection. I no longer feel that way, which creates a big disincentive to run again. It even makes me wonder, when we vote, when we hand that ballot to an election official or mail it in, are our votes being counted properly? Should we be complicit in a system that relies on trust and faith, and it's not really earned our trust?
But my thing is, first of all, I don't think anybody, if you don't run against Wasserman Schultz, who will, that he has the cojones to even challenge her. I mean, I was living down there since 2007 to 2012. I never seen anybody run against her with any kind of cojones or even have a chance to even beat her, until you got there in 2016 and ran. And my second thing is, as far as the election goes, I mean, you've been seeing this all over the country. In Georgia, they had all those voter suppression tactics. I know it's a little different than what happened to you, but Brenda Snipes, and this is what I don't understand, in Broward and all over Palm Beach too, where this happened. Brenda Snipes in Broward County, she was in cahoots with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They were good friends.
Campaigning openly together.
Yeah.
Taking photos together, campaigning together.
But why is nobody upset? Why do you go on TV, you talk about this, and I talk to some of these people in Democratic clubs. They say, "Oh, we don't like Canova. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's not my kind of guy." And right. I'm saying, gee, I don't get it, because this is something, like you said, we have to take care of. This is the vote. This is what separates us. A rich person has one vote and a poor person has one vote. It's an equal thing. That's the only thing that's really equal in this country is the vote.
This is what's absolutely pathetic about a lot of my Democratic friends.
Right.
For friends, they throw around that conspiracy smear. Based on what? That I've called for actual investigations of unsolved crimes that are political in nature, okay?
Yep.
Starting with the ballot destruction. To call for an investigation. And then you look at them. You look at the Democratic Party for 3 years. They've been pursuing a conspiracy theory that's based on nothing. That's based on nothing. You look at the Mueller investigation, the Mueller report, and it turns out that the Hillary Clinton campaign and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the DNC did more colluding with the Russians than anyone.
Right.
They paid $12 million through Fusion GPS to get Kremlin disinformation on Donald Trump.
Right.
Then their allies apparently lied to a FISA court, to a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. This is not over. And the real conspiracy theorists, unfortunately, have been MSNBC and the Democratic Party, including a lot of Florida Democrats.
Right. Well, I'll leave it with this. You read the book that they wrote about the election, the guys, Jonathan Allen, they were following the Hillary Clinton campaign. And it even says on their election night, they knew that they were in bad shape. They made that Russia thing up. They said, how are we going to spin this on the news? And that's what it was about. Bill Clinton, $160 million he took from Russia. How about all the speaking fees that he went over to Russia and do, all the oligarchs that he was with? I mean, come on. And they're calling somebody like you a conspiracy theorist that's actually standing up and fighting for the American people and for the county of Broward County.
This is why I left the party. They called me a conspiracy theorist all through 2017. Yeah. And by the middle of 2018, we had a Florida Circuit Court ruling that it wasn't some theory, that it was true. That Brenda Snipes destroyed the ballots. We had an admission by Snipes. I thought at that point the Democrats would be decent, that Democratic Party officials and elected officials who were Democrats would call for a serious investigation. No, nothing but silence. These folks should be ashamed of themselves. They don't have the best interests of this country at heart. It's tribal politics. It's like Florida State versus University of Florida. Yeah. You're either with one or the other, and the truth doesn't matter.
Well, and then I'll let you go. Is Debbie Wasserman Schultz really that popular down there? I mean,
no, not at all.
Is it with seniors or what?
You can go to just about any Florida Democratic club, and she'll be treated with respect. How many people are at these Florida Democratic clubs in Broward County? Maybe if you add them all up together, you got a few thousand people, and that's it.
Right.
The fact is, when she ventures outside of those Democratic clubs, or a very choreographed audience, maybe at a synagogue or something like that, if she ventures out of there, she gets heckled. It happened all throughout 2018. I can remember I was campaigning in Aventura, and I got home and the phone rang. Somebody told me Wasserman Schultz is down at the boardwalk on Hollywood Beach. So I walked down the boardwalk looking for her. I thought I'd go and challenge her on a live stream for a debate. And by the time I got there, I was told, no, she fled. She was surrounded by about 20 people, and she started getting heckled. She's incredibly unpopular. There's no way she can win a fair election, which is why they have to rig the elections for her.
Yeah, and we'll leave it with that. Tim, I appreciate the time. It's really sad that you didn't win, and it's sad that somebody like her, who is so corrupt, not even what's the stuff that she did with the vote, what she's done with that Pakistani guy. I mean, that's shady. All the stealing she had with the DNC. I mean, they lost over 1,000 seats with her in power. And and then she's treated, like you said, with the DNC elites as a god. So it's a joke. It's a scam. And I feel bad for I know you're an independent now, but I do feel bad for people like me that are young people that really have like someone like you and like want somebody like Tulsi and Bernie to stand up and fight. And, I'm just worried with these new DNC rules, they're going to throw somebody in like Sleepy Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, who are both Wall Street frauds. I mean, I don't know if you believe that too, or do you believe that the DNC is going to rig Bernie, rig Tulsi, and throw in Sleepy Joe or the people person Kamala Harris?
I'm sure the DNC will do everything they can to make sure Tulsi Gabbard does not get the nomination. I'd assume they'll do the same to Bernie Sanders. I doubt it's going to be a fair and open process.
Well, it'll be another loss if they do that because, like you said, they're either going to be chanting racist or Russia, and Trump will wipe the floor in a debate with all those people. So, but Tim, I appreciate your time. I'd love to do this again sometime down the road. Hopefully, it'll be when you're running for an office again. Like I said, we need you in power. I'm a young guy. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a big Politico, and I'm impressed with you, and I really hope that you really get out there because, like I said, we need people like you that are going to talk the talk and walk the walk.
Well,
I appreciate you. Thank you, Tim.
It's been a pleasure to be on with you. Appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you.